Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're jumping straight into the world of a real-life medical thriller. We are going to unpack the terrifying biology of a microscopic villain that operates exactly like a covert assassin. Seriously, it's a story full of incredible stealth, absolutely high stakes, and ultimately some brilliant scientific triumphs. So, let's just unravel this mystery together.
I want to start by posing a question directly to you. What is the world's most lethal infectious disease? Now, you might be thinking of history's great plagues or, some exotic modern outbreak, but the answer, when left without proper medical intervention anyway, is rabies. It is practically 100% deadly once it really takes hold. And to understand why, we've got to travel back in time to a truly desperate moment.
Okay, let's dive into this with a number, 14. Back in France in 1885, a 9-year-old boy named Joseph Meister was attacked by a rabid dog. And he wasn't just bitten once, he was bitten in 14 different places. At that time, this was an almost certain death sentence. There was literally no known cure. But his mother, realizing the absolute direness of the situation, made a totally desperate decision. She rushed her son to Paris, hoping to find a rumored highly experimental medicine. We'll find out exactly what happened to Joseph a little later on, but first, what was he actually up against?
Section 1. Meet the lysovirus, the villain.
So, rabies isn't just one single isolated entity. It's caused by viruses belonging to the lysovirus genus. There are roughly 20 distinct virus species in this group, and every single one of them shares a pretty sinister trait. They specifically attack the mammalian nervous system. The rabies virus, which is the most abundant of these, is made up of microscopic particles called virions. You can think of these virions as highly specialized covert agents, and their sole mission is to target, infiltrate, and completely hijack your nervous system.
Now, where do these covert agents actually live out in the real world? Who are their natural hosts? Well, the lysovirus mainly persists long-term in bat populations. They're the primary reservoir. But over time, the virus has also terrifyingly adapted to carnivores. Think foxes, raccoons, skunks. However, the absolutely crucial point for us is that the vast majority of human rabies infections don't actually come from bats or raccoons. They come from dogs.
Section 2. The covert invasion.
Let's really slow down for a second and walk through this horrific journey step by step. The infection always begins with saliva. Virus-laden saliva is transferred into a new host's tissue, usually through a deep bite wound. But honestly, even a simple lick to an open scratch can be enough. Once inside, the virions do something incredibly devious. They just lay low. They replicate locally without causing any immediate symptoms for days, weeks, months, or, rarely, even years. Actually, scratch that. They aren't just laying low. While they replicate, they're actively suppressing the host's local immune response. Then they finally make their move. They slip into local nerve cells and literally hijack the transport mechanisms along the nerve axons.
Once those virions have hijacked your nerve cells, they move incredibly fast. They can travel up to 100 millimeters a day along your nerves, heading straight for the brain. That's nearly 4 inches a day, which might not sound huge, but on a microscopic cellular level, that is terrifyingly fast. Because of this very targeted pathway, if the initial infection site is physically closer to your head, things escalate much quicker. Plus, their position hidden inside the nerve cells acts like an invisibility cloak, perfectly shielding them from your immune system as they travel.
Let's move to Section 3 and see how this builds, the point of no return.
Okay, so once the virions finally breach the central nervous system, the clinical symptoms start. At first, it just registers as typical flu-like symptoms. But the true, horrifying danger of rabies compared to other diseases lies in its stealth. You see, a typical neurological infection causes inflammation, right? That inflammation opens up the blood-brain barrier, allowing your immune system to rush in and fight the good fight. But rabies viruses, they don't do this. They rapidly multiply without inciting that specific immune response, meaning the blood-brain barrier stays firmly shut. Your immune cells, and even medical therapies, simply cannot easily reach the virus once it's inside the brain.
As the disease really starts damaging the nervous system, the host's condition takes a stark turn down one of two paths. In paralytic rabies, the host develops a vacant expression, severe weakness, and eventual paralysis. But furious rabies? That is the one most of us picture when we hear the word. It brings severe hyperactivity, uncontrolled movements, terrifying hallucinations, raw aggression, and eventually paralysis too.
And furious rabies brings another uniquely horrifying symptom, hydrophobia. Now, this isn't just some irrational fear of water. It's a violent physical reaction where throat spasms make swallowing water excruciatingly painful and almost impossible. So why does the virus do this? Well, as the virions accumulate in the salivary glands, the host secretes excess saliva. By preventing the host from swallowing water to wash it down, the virus heavily concentrates itself right there in that extra saliva, which dramatically increases the odds of it being transmitted to a brand new victim. It's a remarkably twisted evolutionary trick.
Now, it's important to note that humans are essentially dead-end hosts. We very rarely transmit rabies to others, though, okay, it has happened in some extremely rare cases of organ transplantation. But the grim reality is this. Regardless of whether transmission occurs, this period of acute illness is almost always followed by coma and death. A very, very small number of people are known to have survived after the onset of symptoms, but it requires extreme intensive care and they usually sustain severe neurological damage. Right now, there is no true cure once those symptoms begin.
Section 4. Our modern shield.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly what we were talking about earlier with 9-year-old Joseph Meister. This timeline shows what that rumored experimental medicine actually was. The brilliant French scientist Louis Pasteur and his colleagues had spent years developing a vaccine. They collected the spinal cords of rabies-infected rabbits, spent weeks drawing them out to weaken the virus, and then spent months injecting those mixtures into dogs. So when Joseph's mother brought him to Pasteur just 2 days after that horrific attack, Pasteur took a massive leap of faith. He gave Joseph a course of those inoculations. It was incredibly risky, but you know what? It worked. Joseph Meister beat the odds and became the first rabies-vaccinated person to survive.
Pasteur's incredibly brave work is the whole foundation of our modern defense. Today, thankfully, we don't have to rely on dried rabbit spinal cords. We have 2 highly effective series of vaccinations: pre-exposure prophylaxis for people at high risk and post-exposure prophylaxis for after an incident occurs. If they're delivered early enough, these vaccines stop the virus dead in its tracks before it can even reach the central nervous system. It literally stops the whole shebang before symptoms develop and before the virus can do any irreparable harm.
But despite having this incredible medical shield, I've got a tragic data drop for you. Roughly 59,000 people are still estimated to die of rabies annually around the globe. To put that into perspective, that's one person dying roughly every 9 minutes. And the heartbreaking truth is that the real number is likely much higher, simply because of insufficient medical access in heavily rabies-burdened areas of the world.
Scientists are constantly looking into new therapies to try and treat the infection after symptoms start, but the virus's ability to perfectly elude the immune system just makes it notoriously difficult to combat. Furthermore, because the lysovirus has so many natural animal hosts out in the wild, we literally cannot eradicate the disease entirely. It's always going to be out there. And that makes early preventative measures our only true definitive defense.
So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought to take away from our explainer today. Because this virus is so incredibly covert, and because the stakes are quite literally life and death, even an unconfirmed potential exposure requires action. If you wake up and find that a bat has simply been hanging out in your bedroom while you were sleeping, you cannot assume you're safe just because you don't physically see a bite mark. The mere presence of that bat warrants serious, immediate medical investigation. Rabies is the ultimate stealth killer, for sure. But with swift action and modern science, it is a killer we can absolutely defeat. Thank you so much for joining me today on The Explainer. Stay curious, stay safe, and I will see you next time.